was about to sign my $5 million life insurance policy over to my wife. She handed me a glass of water with a smile. The housekeeper accidentally bumped into me and whispered, "Don't drink, just swap the glasses." I switched them while she was distracted. 2 minutes later, she took a sip, dropped the pen, and I'm glad to have you here. Follow this story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Frederick, and I'm 61 years old. I never thought I'd be telling this story, but here we are. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you should fear the most, and sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. It was a Tuesday morning in October when everything changed. The autumn light filtered through the tall windows of my home office, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk that had belonged to my father. I was sitting there, fountain pen in hand, staring at the life insurance policy spread before me. $5 million. The number looked so stark on the crisp white paper. Miranda, my wife of 15 years, stood behind my chair with her perfectly manicured hand resting on my shoulder. She was 45, still beautiful in that carefully maintained way that required weekly salon appointments and monthly spa treatments. Her blonde hair was pulled back into an elegant chignon, and she wore the pearl earrings I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. "Are you ready, darling?" she asked, her voice honey-sweet. "Dr. Richards is waiting for us to sign so he can witness everything properly." Dr. Richards sat across from me, briefcase open, looking professional in his navy suit. He'd been our family lawyer for 3 years now, handling various legal matters. Miranda had recommended him after we'd had some issues with our previous attorney. I should have questioned that recommendation more carefully. "Just making sure I understand everything," I said, adjusting my reading glasses. The words on the page seemed to blur slightly. I'd been having trouble focusing lately, feeling more tired than usual. Miranda kept telling me it was just age, that all men went through this as they got older. "It's quite straightforward, Mr. Williams," Dr. Richards assured me. "Upon your death, the full $5 million will be paid directly to Mrs. Williams as your sole beneficiary. Very clean, very simple." I nodded, though something felt off. Maybe it was the way Miranda's fingers tightened slightly on my shoulder, or how Dr. Richards kept glancing at his watch. There was an urgency in the air that I couldn't quite place. "Would you like some water before you sign?" Miranda asked, moving to the small bar cart in the corner of the office. "You look a bit pale, sweetheart." She poured water from the crystal pitcher into 2 glasses. One of them my favorite blue crystal glass that had belonged to my mother, the other a simple, clear tumbler. I watched her hands as she moved, noticing how steady they were, how deliberate each motion seemed. That's when Elena appeared in the doorway. Elena had been our housekeeper for 4 years now. She was 52, a quiet widow from El Salvador who took care of our home with meticulous attention to detail. Unlike Miranda, Elena never wore makeup or expensive clothes. Her graying hair was always pulled back in a simple bun, and she moved through the house like a gentle ghost, appearing when needed and disappearing just as quietly. "Excuse me, Mrs. Williams," Elena said softly, her accent barely noticeable after all these years in America. "I brought fresh flowers for the office." She carried a small vase of white roses, the ones she'd been growing in our back garden. Elena had a gift with plants. Everything she touched seemed to bloom. The roses were perfect, each petal pristine white with just a hint of pink at the edges. Miranda waved her hand dismissively. "Just put them anywhere, Elena. We're in the middle of something important." But as Elena approached the desk to place the flowers, something extraordinary happened. She stumbled, or at least it looked like a stumble. The vase tilted, and in her effort to catch it, she bumped into me. In that moment, as she steadied herself with one hand on my arm, she leaned close to my ear. "Don't drink," she whispered, so quietly I almost thought I'd imagined it. "Just swap the glasses." My heart stopped. Elena straightened up immediately, apologizing profusely in Spanish and English, fussing over the flowers that hadn't actually spilled. But her dark eyes met mine for just a second, and in that glance, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Fear. Fear for me. Miranda rushed over, irritation flashing across her features. Elena, please be more careful. Can't you see we're conducting business? I'm so sorry, Mrs. Williams. So sorry, Mr. Williams. I'll clean this up and leave you alone. But the damage was done. Elena's whispered words echoed in my mind as she fussed around the desk, straightening papers and adjusting the flower vase. Don't drink, swap the glasses. What did she know that I didn't? Miranda returned to the bar cart, picking up both glasses of water. Here you go, darling, she said, handing me the blue crystal glass. My mother's glass, the one she'd poured first. My hand trembled slightly as I took it. Elena was still in the room, now dusting the bookshelf behind Dr. Richards, but I could feel her presence like a guardian angel. Whatever she'd seen, whatever she knew, it had been important enough for her to risk everything by warning me. Thank you, I managed to say to Miranda, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Miranda picked up her own glass and raised it slightly. To our future security, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's when I made the decision that would save my life. As Miranda turned to say something to Dr. Richards about the paperwork, I quickly switched our glasses. The blue crystal glass went to where hers had been, and I took the clear tumbler. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Elena caught my eye from across the room and gave the tiniest nod of approval before looking away. Miranda turned back to me, glass in hand. Shall we toast before you sign? Of course, I said, raising my glass, the clear one that had originally been hers. We both lifted our glasses to our lips. I pretended to sip, barely letting the water touch my tongue. Miranda, however, took a real drink. A generous sip from what she thought was her own glass but was actually mine. For a moment, nothing happened. Dr. Richards was organizing papers, talking about witnessing requirements. Miranda set her glass down and moved to stand behind me again. Whenever you're ready, Frederick, she said. I lifted the pen, my hand shaking slightly, but before I could touch it to paper, Miranda made a small sound, almost like a hiccup. I looked up to see her face had gone pale. Are you all right, dear? I asked, though something cold was spreading through my chest. She started, then her hand went to her throat. I feel dizzy. Dr. Richards looked up sharply from his paperwork. Miranda, what's wrong? She swayed on her feet, one hand gripping the back of my chair. Something's not right, I feel. Her words became slurred, her eyes unfocused, and then she collapsed. The pen fell from my hand as I jumped up to catch her, but she was already on the floor, unconscious. Dr. Richards was on his feet, his face white with panic. Call 911, he shouted, dropping to his knees beside Miranda. But I couldn't move. I stood there staring down at my unconscious wife, Elena's words echoing in my mind. Don't drink. Swap the glasses. Elena appeared at my side as if from nowhere. I'll call the ambulance, she said quietly, but her eyes weren't on Miranda. They were on me, filled with something I was only beginning to understand. Relief. As sirens wailed in the distance and Dr. Richards performed CPR on my wife, one thought kept running through my head like a prayer. Elena had saved my life. But from what? And more terrifying still, from whom? The woman I'd been married to for 15 years lay unconscious on my office floor, and I was beginning to realize I might not know her at all. The hospital waiting room smelled of disinfectant and fear. I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, still wearing the same clothes from that morning, though it felt like a lifetime ago. Miranda had been unconscious for 6 hours now. The doctors said she'd ingested some kind of natural sedative, valerian root, they thought, mixed with something else that made it much stronger than normal. Dr. Richards had left 2 hours earlier, claiming he had other appointments. His hasty departure struck me as odd, but then again everything seemed odd now. The world had shifted, and I wasn't sure what was real anymore. Elena sat beside me, her hands folded in her lap. She'd insisted on coming to the hospital, saying it was her duty as part of the household. But I knew better now. She was here because she was the only person who truly understood what had happened. Elena, I said quietly, my voice hoarse from hours of silence. We need to talk. She nodded, her dark eyes meeting mine. Yes, Mr. Williams, we do. We moved to a small chapel near the hospital's main lobby. It was empty except for a few wooden pews and a simple cross on the wall. The silence here felt different, peaceful rather than tense. You saved my life today, I said, settling onto a pew beside her. You knew something was in that glass. Elena's weathered hands twisted in her lap. She'd removed her apron when we left the house, and without it she looked smaller, more vulnerable. But her voice was steady when she spoke. Mr. Williams, I need to show you something. I should have shown you weeks ago, but I was scared. I didn't know if you would believe me. She reached into her small black purse and pulled out a composition notebook, the kind children use in school. It was filled with Elena's careful handwriting, dated entries going back months. I started writing things down in January, she said, opening to the first page. At first I thought maybe I was imagining things, but then it happened too many times to be coincidence. I took the notebook with trembling hands. Elena's English was much better written than spoken, each entry clear and detailed. January 15th. Mrs. Williams put something in Mr. Williams's morning tea. He complained of feeling dizzy at breakfast. She said it was just his blood pressure. January 22nd. Found small bottle hidden in Mrs. Williams's dresser. Label says valerian root extract, natural sleep aid. But why hide it? February 3rd. Mr. Williams very tired again after lunch. Mrs. Williams made his sandwich herself, told me not to bother. He slept all afternoon. The entries went on, page after page, documenting months of what I now realized had been a slow, deliberate campaign. Elena had been watching, recording, trying to protect me in the only way she knew how. You documented everything, I whispered, my throat tight with emotion. I was afraid, she admitted. In my country, sometimes people disappear when they ask too many questions. But I couldn't let her hurt you. I continued reading, my hands shaking as the pattern became clear. Miranda had been drugging me for months, starting with small amounts that just made me tired and confused. The doctors I'd seen, at her insistence, had attributed my symptoms to age, stress, normal decline. But Elena had seen the truth. March 10th. Mrs. Williams met with Dr. Richards at the house when Mr. Williams was napping. They talked very quietly in the kitchen. I heard her say, "When this is all over," and $5 million. March 18th. Found receipt in Mrs. Williams' purse. Large purchase from herbal supplement store. Same day Mr. Williams felt very sick after dinner. April 2nd. Dr. Richards came again. This time I listened from the pantry. Mrs. Williams said, "It has to look natural, and no one will question it at his age." My blood ran cold as I read those words. They weren't just talking about making me sleep. They were planning my death. "Elena," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you known?" "I suspected for months," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "But I knew for certain 3 weeks ago. I was cleaning Mrs. Williams' bedroom and found a letter she was writing. She left it open on her desk. She flipped to a page near the back of the notebook and handed it to me. There, in Elena's careful script, were words that made my heart stop. Letter from Mrs. Williams to someone named Michael. "My dear, I can't wait much longer. Frederick is getting suspicious and Elena is always watching. Dr. Richards says we need to finish this soon. Once I have the insurance money, we can be together like we planned. Just a few more weeks and I'll be free of this old man forever." I stared at the page, reading it over and over, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Miranda had a lover named Michael. She was planning to kill me for the insurance money. And Elena had been my only protection. "Who is Michael?" I asked, though part of me already suspected. Elena hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She scrolled through some photos and handed it to me. The image showed Miranda in what looked like a restaurant sitting across from a man. They were holding hands across the table, looking into each other's eyes like lovers. The man was Dr. Richards. His real name is Michael Richards, Elena said softly. I followed her one day when she said she was going shopping. Instead, she went to meet him at a hotel downtown. I took pictures because I thought maybe you should know your wife was cheating. But then I realized it was much worse than cheating. Everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. The new lawyer Miranda had recommended, the urgency about updating the life insurance, the months of mysterious illnesses that had been slowly weakening me. It had all been planned. They were going to kill me today, I said, the words feeling unreal as they left my mouth. Elena nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. The insurance papers were the last step. Once you signed them, making Mrs. Williams the only beneficiary, they were going to give you a larger dose, enough to... She couldn't finish the sentence. Enough to make it look like a heart attack. I finished for her. An old man, stressed about money, dies peacefully in his sleep after signing important papers. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of the truth settling between us. My wife of 15 years had been slowly poisoning me, planning to murder me for money so she could run away with her lover. And Elena, quiet, invisible Elena, had been documenting everything, looking for a way to save me. Why? I finally asked. Why didn't you go to the police? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Who would believe the housekeeper over the beautiful wife and the respected lawyer? I have no education, no money, no important friends. And Mrs. Williams. She could be very convincing when she wanted to be. I knew she was right. Miranda had always been charming, persuasive. If Elena had come to me months ago with accusations of poisoning, I might not have believed her either. I might have thought she was jealous or unstable. But now, with Miranda unconscious in a hospital bed from drinking the very drug she'd meant for me, the truth was undeniable. How did you know today was the day? I asked. Yesterday I heard Mrs. Williams on the phone with Michael, Dr. Richards. She said, tomorrow is the day. Once he signs those papers, we can finish this. Have the stronger mixture ready. That's when I knew I had to do something. Elena had saved my life with nothing but courage and quick thinking. While I'd been trusting the woman who slept beside me every night, it was the quiet woman who cleaned my house who had been protecting me. Elena, I said, my voice thick with emotion, you risked everything for me. You could have lost your job, your visa status, everything. Why? She was quiet for a moment, looking down at her hands. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. My husband died 5 years ago. Before I came to work for you, I was very alone in this country. You were always kind to me, Mr. Williams. You asked about my family, remembered my birthday, treated me like a human being. Mrs. Williams, she treated me like furniture. But you saw me. Tears burned my eyes as I listened. Elena was right. I had tried to be kind to her, but I'd had no idea how much those small gestures had meant, or how they had ultimately saved my life. When I started to see what she was doing to you, Elena continued, I couldn't stand by and watch. You didn't deserve to die because you were too trusting to see the evil in someone you loved. The chapel fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Not empty, but full of understanding. Elena had given me the greatest gift possible, my life. And in return, she had asked for nothing. What happens now? I asked. Elena closed the notebook and held it against her chest. That depends on what you want to happen, Mr. Williams. I have evidence, but it's still my word against theirs. Mrs. Williams will wake up eventually and she'll have explanations for everything. I thought about Miranda lying in that hospital bed. When she woke up, she would spin a story about feeling dizzy, about accidentally drinking something meant for me. She would cry and apologize and make it seem like a terrible misunderstanding. Dr. Richards would support her version of events. And without Elena's careful documentation, I might have believed them. But now I knew the truth, and more importantly, I knew who I could trust. Elena, I said, standing up from the pew, I think it's time we had a very serious conversation about the future. She looked up at me, hope and fear warring in her dark eyes. I had been blind for 15 years, But Elena had helped me see clearly. Now it was time to decide what to do with that clarity. Miranda woke up 3 days later, and the performance began immediately. I was sitting in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside her bed when her eyelids fluttered open. The afternoon sun streamed through the blinds, casting stripes of light across her pale face. For a moment she looked genuinely confused, vulnerable even. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have felt sorry for her. "Frederick?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "What happened? Where am I?" She was good. Even knowing what I knew now, I had to admire her acting ability. The confusion in her blue eyes looked completely genuine. "You collapsed at home," I said, carefully studying her face. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." Miranda's hand went to her throat and she winced as if in pain. I remember feeling dizzy. "Did I hit my head when I fell?" "No," I said. "The doctors say you ingested something, a natural sedative, valerian root." I watched for any flicker of recognition, any tell that would give her away. But Miranda was too practiced for that. Her brow furrowed in perfect confusion. "Valerian root? But I don't take anything like that. I've never even heard of it." She struggled to sit up, and I automatically moved to help her, old habits dying hard. "Frederick, I don't understand. How could I have taken something I've never heard of?" The nurse entered the room just then, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and efficient movements. "Oh, good, you're awake. How are you feeling, Mrs. Williams?" "Confused," Miranda said, and that at least was probably true. "The doctor says I took some kind of herbal supplement, but I don't remember taking anything." The nurse checked Miranda's vitals and made notes on her chart. Memory gaps aren't uncommon after this kind of incident. "The important thing is that you're stable now. Doctor, Martinez will want to see you in about an hour." After the nurse left, Miranda reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold and I noticed how they trembled slightly. Whether from fear or lingering effects of the sedative, I couldn't tell. "Frederick, I'm scared," she said, her voice small. "What if someone poisoned me? What if they were trying to hurt us both and I accidentally drank something meant for you?" It was a clever deflection. I had to give her that. Turn herself into the victim while planting the seed that someone else was the real threat. But I wasn't the same trusting man I'd been 3 days ago. "Who would want to hurt us?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Miranda's grip on my hand tightened. "I don't know, but Frederick, we need to be careful. Maybe we should cancel that insurance policy until we figure out what happened." There it was, her first real mistake. The insurance policy hadn't been mentioned since she'd collapsed. If she truly had no memory of recent events, how would she even remember we'd been about to sign it? I pulled my hand away gently. "Miranda, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." Something flickered in her eyes then, just for a second, and I saw the calculation behind the confusion. But she recovered quickly. "Of course, darling. What is it? Do you know anyone named Michael?" The color drained from her face so completely that for a moment I thought she might faint again. But she rallied, forcing a weak smile. "Michael? That's such a common name." "Michael who?" "Michael Richards." This time she couldn't hide her reaction. Her breath caught and her hand went instinctively to her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, clearly struggling to find the right words. "Frederick," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you hear that name?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out Elena's notebook. Miranda's eyes fixed on it like it was a poisonous snake. "Elena has been watching you for months," I said quietly. "She documented everything, Miranda. The gradual poisoning, the secret meetings, the planning, all of it." Miranda stared at the notebook, and I watched as her carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The confusion in her eyes was replaced by something harder, more calculating. "Elena," she said, and the way she pronounced the name made it sound like a curse. "That woman has always been jealous of me. Frederick, surely you can't believe the word of a housekeeper over your own wife." "She has photos," I said. Miranda's composure cracked completely then. She pushed herself up in the hospital bed, her face flushed with sudden anger. Photos of what? Of me having lunch with our lawyer? Frederick, Michael Richards is our attorney. Of course I've met with him. At the Marriott downtown? In the restaurant where you were holding hands and looking at each other like lovers? Miranda's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed to be at a complete loss for words. I saw the letter too, I continued, my voice still calm despite the storm of emotions inside me. The one where you called me this old man and talked about being free once you had the insurance money. The transformation was startling. The vulnerable, confused woman in the hospital bed disappeared completely, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Miranda's face hardened, her blue eyes turning cold as winter ice. Fine, she said, her voice sharp as a blade. You want the truth? Here's the truth, Frederick. Yes, I've been seeing Michael. Yes, we love each other. And yes, I wanted out of this marriage. The admission hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting it. Hearing her say it out loud, seeing the lack of remorse in her eyes made it real in a way that reading about it hadn't. But poisoning me? I asked. Planning to kill me? Miranda laughed, a harsh sound that had no humor in it. Kill you? Frederick, don't be so dramatic. I was just giving you a little help sleeping. You've been so stressed lately, so worried about money and aging. I was helping you relax, with doses large enough to eventually stop my heart. Her eyes flashed with something dangerous. You can't prove that. And even if you could, who's going to believe it? A confused old man manipulated by his jealous housekeeper against his loving wife? I stared at her, this woman I'd shared a bed with for 15 years, and realized I was looking at a complete stranger. The Miranda I thought I'd married had never existed at all. You're right, I said finally. It would be hard to prove in court. Good thing I'm not planning to take it to court. Miranda frowned, uncertainty creeping back into her expression. What do you mean? I stood up, tucking Elena's notebook back into my jacket. I mean, I'm done, Miranda. I'm filing for divorce. You can keep fighting for the insurance money if you want, but you won't get it. I'm changing all my beneficiaries. You can't do that. She struggled to get out of bed, but the IV line and her weakness kept her trapped. Frederick, we can work this out. I made a mistake with Michael, but I still love you. We can go to counseling. We can... You tried to kill me, I said simply. There's no coming back from that. Miranda's face cycled through a range of emotions, anger, desperation, calculation. Finally, she settled on rage. You'll regret this, she spat. I'll take you for everything you have. I'll destroy you, Frederick. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. She was sitting up in the hospital bed, her blonde hair disheveled, her face twisted with fury. She looked like a beautiful monster. The kind of man who was saved by his housekeeper because she cared enough to protect him, I said. I think I can live with that reputation. I left her there, screaming threats at my retreating figure. But for the first time in months, I felt free. Elena was waiting in the hospital lobby, sitting quietly in a chair by the window. She stood when she saw me, her dark eyes searching my face. How did it go? She asked. About as well as you'd expect, I said. She admitted everything, then threatened to destroy me when I told her I was filing for divorce. Elena nodded as if she'd expected nothing less. What will you do now? I looked at this woman who had saved my life, who had asked for nothing in return, who had shown me more loyalty than my own wife. Elena, who tended my garden and brought fresh flowers to brighten my office. Elena, who remembered my coffee preferences and noticed when I seemed tired. Elena, who had seen me as a human being worth protecting when my own wife had seen me as nothing more than a bank account. I'd like to take you to dinner, I said, if you're willing. I think we have a lot to talk about. Elena's face lit up with the first real smile I'd seen from her in months. I would like that very much, Mr. Williams. Frederick, I corrected gently. Just Frederick. As we walked out of the hospital together, I felt like I was walking into a completely new life. Behind me lay 15 years of lies and betrayal. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. And beside me walked the woman who had given me the chance to have a future at all. The restaurant Elena chose was nothing like the places Miranda used to insist on. No crystal chandeliers or white tablecloths here. Just warm lighting, comfortable wooden tables, and the smell of authentic Mexican food. Elena had suggested it hesitantly, worried it wasn't fancy enough, but it was perfect. For the first time in years, I was somewhere that felt real. We sat across from each other in a corner booth, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between us as we talked. Elena had changed out of her usual work clothes into a simple blue dress that brought out the warmth in her dark eyes. Without the formality of our employer-employee relationship between us, I was seeing her differently. Not as my housekeeper, but as the remarkable woman who had saved my life. You know, I said, stirring sugar into my coffee, I realized today that I don't know very much about you. In 4 years, I never asked about your life before you came to work for us. Elena looked down at her hands. You were always kind to ask about my family, about my day. That was more than most employers do. But I never asked about your dreams, your hopes. I never asked what you wanted from life. She was quiet for a long moment, and I wondered if I'd overstepped somehow. But when she looked up, her eyes were thoughtful, rather than uncomfortable. I wanted to be a teacher, she said softly. Back in El Salvador, I taught elementary school for 12 years. I loved those children, loved watching their faces when they understood something new. Why did you leave? Elena's expression grew sad. My husband, Carlos, was a journalist. He wrote articles about corruption in our local government. One day, some men came to our house and told him to stop writing or there would be consequences. She paused, her voice growing quieter. Carlos said he couldn't stop telling the truth. 2 weeks later, he was killed in what they called a car accident. I felt a chill run down my spine. Elena, I'm so sorry. She nodded, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup as if drawing warmth from it. I knew I had to leave. The same men who killed Carlos made it clear I wasn't welcome in my hometown anymore. I came to America with nothing. No money, no English, no family. I couldn't teach here because my credentials weren't recognized, and my English wasn't good enough anyway, so you became a housekeeper. It was work I could find, she said simply, and it let me stay invisible, which felt safer. I sent most of my money back to my sister in El Salvador. She has 4 children, and her husband left her. I stared at Elena, seeing her with completely new eyes. Here was a woman who had lost everything, her husband, her career, her home, her country, and had started over with nothing but courage and determination. She'd spent 4 years cleaning houses and sending money to her sister while living in a tiny apartment and asking for nothing. Meanwhile, Miranda had spent 15 years complaining about not having enough designer clothes. Elena, I said carefully, what would you do if you could do anything? If money and visas and credentials weren't problems? She smiled, a real smile that transformed her entire face. I would teach again, maybe ESL, English as a second language. Help other immigrants like me learn to navigate this country. She paused, then added shyly, I would also like to have a garden. A real garden where I could grow vegetables and flowers and maybe keep some chickens. The simplicity and honesty of her dreams hit me harder than any of Miranda's expensive demands ever had. Elena wanted to help others and grow things. She wanted to nurture and create rather than take and consume. What about travel? I asked. Have you seen much of America? Elena shook her head. Only the bus trip from the border to here. I always wanted to see the Grand Canyon, maybe the ocean. Carlos and I used to dream about visiting all the national parks. Her voice grew wistful. He would have loved Yellowstone, I think. He was always fascinated by geology. An idea began to form in my mind, tentative at first, but growing stronger as I looked at this woman who had given me back my life. Elena, I said, I have a proposition for you. She tilted her head, curious but cautious. I'm 61 years old, I continued. I have more money than I know what to do with, and thanks to you I have the rest of my life ahead of me instead of an early grave. I don't want to spend that life alone in a house full of bad memories. Elena's eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent. I'm going to sell the house, I said. All of it. The house, most of the furniture, everything that reminds me of Miranda. I want to travel, see the country, maybe find a small place somewhere peaceful to settle down. That sounds wonderful, Elena said softly. I want you to come with me. The words hung in the air between us. Elena stared at me, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. Mr. Williams. Frederick, I corrected. And I don't mean as my employee. I mean as my companion, my friend. I paused, then decided to be completely honest. As someone I'm hoping might become much more than that, given time. Elena set down her cup with trembling hands. Frederick, you don't owe me anything. I didn't save you because I wanted a reward. I know that, I said. That's exactly why I'm asking. Elena, you've shown me what real loyalty looks like, what genuine care looks like. You've shown me that there are still good people in the world. I don't want to lose that. She was quiet for so long that I began to worry I'd misread everything, that I'd made her uncomfortable with my proposal. But when she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. You would do that? Give up your life here to travel with me? What life? I asked. Elena, that house is just a building full of lies. My wife tried to kill me. My friends are mostly her friends, and I've spent the last 15 years living someone else's idea of what my life should be. I leaned forward, willing her to understand. You've given me the chance to start over. I don't want to waste it. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Where would we go? Wherever you want, I said. The Grand Canyon first, maybe, then Yellowstone. We could take our time, see everything Carlos would have wanted to see. And when we're ready to settle down, we'll find a place with room for that garden you want. And chickens? She asked, laughing through her tears. As many chickens as you want. Elena wiped her eyes with her napkin, then looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Hope mixed with something that might have been love. There's something you should know, she said. I've been in love with you for 2 years. The confession hit me like a physical force. Elena. I know it was wrong, she said quickly. You were married, and I was your employee. I never would have said anything or acted on it. But when I saw what Mrs. Williams was doing to you, when I realized she was trying to kill the man I loved, she shook her head. I couldn't let that happen. I reached across the table and took her hands in mine. They were small and work-worn, with calluses from gardening and cleaning, but they were the most beautiful hands I'd ever held. You saved me in more ways than you know, I said. Elena, I want to spend whatever years I have left making you happy. Will you let me try? She squeezed my hands, her dark eyes bright with tears and joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. We sat there in that little Mexican restaurant, holding hands across a worn wooden table, and I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Genuine happiness. Not the shallow pleasure of expensive things or social status, but the deep contentment that comes from being with someone who truly sees and values you. There's one more thing, I said. I'm changing my will. Everything I have, the house sale, my investments, my pension, everything, I want to leave it all to you. Elena's eyes widened in shock. Frederick, no. That's too much. I know you don't need it, I said. That's exactly why I want you to have it. Miranda saw dollar signs when she looked at me. You see a person worth protecting. The difference means everything. She was crying now, tears of joy and overwhelming emotion. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come with me to the Grand Canyon next week. Elena laughed, a sound more beautiful than any music I'd ever heard. Yes, Frederick, I'll go anywhere with you. As we left the restaurant that night, walking slowly under the streetlights, I realized that Miranda had done me a favor without meaning to. Her betrayal had shown me the difference between someone who wanted to use me and someone who wanted to save me, and now I was about to embark on the greatest adventure of my life, with the woman who had given me back my future. 3 weeks later, I was boxing up the last of my belongings when the doorbell rang. Elena and I had spent days going through the house, deciding what to keep and what to donate. Most of Miranda's expensive furniture and decorations would go to auction. I wanted nothing that reminded me of the life I'd been living. Or rather, the lie I'd been living. Elena was in the garden, carefully transplanting her roses into portable containers so we could take them with us. She'd found a beautiful property in northern Arizona, just an hour from the Grand Canyon with 10 acres and a view of the Red Rocks. The owner was a widow who wanted to sell to someone who would love the land as much as her late husband had. When Elena described her plans for the garden and mentioned the chickens she wanted to raise, the woman had practically insisted we buy it. I expected the doorbell to be the moving company coming early to pick up the items we were donating. Instead, when I opened the front door, I found Miranda standing on the porch. She looked different than she had in the hospital. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled again, and she wore a black dress that was both elegant and subtly revealing. Her makeup was flawless, designed to make her look vulnerable and beautiful. But her eyes, those blue eyes that had once seemed so warm, were cold and calculating. "Hello, Frederick," she said, her voice soft and carefully modulated. "May I come in? I think we need to talk." Every instinct told me to close the door in her face. But something about her demeanor made me curious. Miranda was many things, but she wasn't stupid. She had to know that showing up here was pointless. The divorce papers had been filed, the will had been changed, and I'd already canceled the life insurance policy she'd been so eager for me to sign. "5 minutes," I said, stepping back to let her enter. Miranda walked into the living room and looked around at the boxes and empty spaces where her expensive art used to hang. She ran her finger along the mantelpiece where her crystal figurines had once displayed, now bare except for a single photo, one of Elena's roses in full bloom. "You're really doing this," she said, not quite a question. "I'm really doing this." She turned to face me, and I saw something desperate flickering beneath her composed exterior. "Frederick, I know you're angry. I know I hurt you, but don't you think you're being a bit extreme?" I almost laughed. Extreme? The woman who had been slowly poisoning me for months thought I was being extreme by divorcing her. "Extreme would be pressing charges," I said calmly. "Extreme would be making sure everyone knows exactly what you and Michael Richards were planning." Miranda's carefully controlled mask slipped for just a moment. "You have no proof of anything criminal. Elena's little notebook wouldn't hold up in court, and you know it." "You're probably right," I agreed. "But I don't need proof for a divorce. I just need to not want to be married to you anymore." She took a step closer, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, the same expensive scent she'd worn for years. It used to comfort me, make me think of coming home. Now it made my stomach turn. "Frederick," she said, her voice dropping to that honey-sweet tone she'd perfected over our 15 years together. "I know what this is really about. It's that woman, isn't it? That maid." "Elena is not a maid," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "She's a teacher who was forced to leave her country. She's a widow who rebuilt her life from nothing. She's a person with dignity and integrity, concepts you might not be familiar with." Miranda's eyes flashed with anger, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, Frederick, you poor, naive man. Don't you see what she's done? She's manipulated you, turned you against me. She probably planned this whole thing from the beginning." "Really?" I asked. "Elena planned for you to poison me? She somehow forced you to have an affair with Michael Richards? She made you write those letters about wanting me dead?" "She saw an opportunity," Miranda said, her voice becoming more insistent. "A lonely old man, a failing marriage. She played the part of the faithful servant while undermining me at every turn. And now look, she's convinced you to give her everything." I stared at Miranda, genuinely amazed by her ability to rewrite reality. Even now, caught in her lies, facing the complete destruction of her plans, she was trying to paint herself as the victim. "You know what the difference is between you and Elena?" I said quietly. "When Elena saw me in danger, she protected me. When you saw me vulnerable, you tried to exploit me." Miranda's composure finally cracked completely, her beautiful face twisted with rage and desperation. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," she snapped. "I am your wife. I gave you 15 years of my life, and this is how you repay me. By throwing me away for some illegal immigrant who cleans toilets for a living?" The venom in her voice when she spoke about Elena made something cold and hard settle in my chest. This was who Miranda really was. Not the charming woman who had swept me off my feet after my first wife died, but this cruel, grasping creature who saw other human beings as either useful or disposable. "Elena has her green card," I said evenly, "and she saved more money in 4 years than you've managed in 15, because she doesn't spend every penny on things designed to impress people she doesn't even like." Miranda's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Fine, be with your precious Elena. But don't think this is over, Frederick. I'll fight the divorce. I'll take half of everything you have. I'll make sure everyone knows you abandoned your wife for the help." "Go ahead," I said. "But you might want to check the post-nuptial agreement you signed 3 years ago." The color drained from Miranda's face. "What post-nuptial agreement?" "The one you signed when you insisted we needed to protect our assets after your friend Susan got divorced, remember? You were so focused on making sure I couldn't take anything from you in a divorce that you didn't pay much attention to the reciprocal clauses." I watched as understanding dawned in her eyes. She had been so confident that she would outlive me, so certain that the divorce scenario would never apply to her, that she'd signed away her rights to anything I'd owned before our marriage, which was almost everything. "You son of a bitch," she whispered. "Actually," said a voice from the doorway, "he's a very kind man who deserves much better than what you gave him." We both turned to see Elena standing in the entrance to the living room, a tray of coffee in her hands. She'd obviously heard at least part of our conversation, but her expression was calm and composed. Miranda's face contorted with hatred as she looked at Elena. "You," she hissed, "this is all your fault." Elena set the tray down on the coffee table with steady hands. "No, Mrs. Williams, this is your fault. You chose to betray the man who loved you. You chose to try to hurt him. You chose to see him as something to be used rather than someone to be cherished." "How dare you?" "I dare," Elena said quietly, "because someone needs to tell you the truth. Mr. Frederick is a good man who deserves to be loved, not murdered for his money." Miranda took a step toward Elena, her face flushed with rage. "You manipulative little—" "That's enough," I said, moving to stand between them. "Miranda, you need to leave. Now." For a moment I thought she might actually attack Elena. Her whole body was trembling with fury, her hands raised as if she wanted to strike. But then she seemed to remember where she was, what she was doing. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and threatening. "You'll both regret this." She turned on her heel and stalked toward the door, but paused at the threshold to deliver one final blow. "When you're old and sick and dying, Frederick, and she's counting the money you left her, remember that I was the one who loved you first." The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. Elena and I stood in the sudden silence, looking at each other across the empty room. Then Elena did something that surprised me. She started laughing. Not bitter laughter, but genuine amusement. "What's funny?" I asked. "She said she loved you first," Elena said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "But love isn't about being first, Frederick. It's about being true." I crossed the room and took her in my arms, breathing in the scent of roses and earth that clung to her hair. She was right, of course. Miranda had been first, but Elena was real. "Are you worried?" I asked. "About what she might try to do?" Elena looked up at me, her dark eyes serious but unafraid. "Let her try," she said. "We have truth on our side. And Frederick?" "Yes?" "We have each other." Outside, I heard the sound of Miranda's car driving away, taking with it the last remnant of the life I used to live. Tomorrow, Elena and I would begin our drive to Arizona, to the red rocks and wide skies where we would build something new together. I wasn't afraid of Miranda's threats anymore. 2 years later, I woke up to the sound of chickens clucking outside my bedroom window and Elena humming softly in the kitchen. For a moment, I just lay there, savoring the peace of it. No tension, no undercurrent of manipulation, no walking on eggshells. Just the simple pleasure of knowing that the person I loved was happy and safe. Our house in Arizona was nothing like the mansion I'd shared with Miranda. It was smaller, simpler, with adobe walls and wooden beams that Elena had insisted we install ourselves. A house should be built with love, she'd said, and somehow we'd managed it. Despite my complete lack of construction experience and her tendency to laugh at my attempts to use power tools, I pulled on my robe and walked to the kitchen, where Elena was making coffee in the French press she'd bought at a local market. She wore a simple cotton dress and had her hair pulled back in a braid. At 54, she was more beautiful than ever, her face glowing with contentment and purpose. "Good morning, mi amor," she said, rising on her tiptoes to kiss my cheek. Even after all this time, the endearment made my heart skip. "Good morning, beautiful. How are the chickens?" Elena laughed. "Henrietta laid 3 eggs this morning. I think she's showing off for the new rooster." We'd named all 12 chickens, much to the amusement of our nearest neighbor, Tom, who lived a mile down the road. Tom was a retired park ranger who'd become our closest friend. He'd helped us learn about desert gardening and had taught Elena to drive my old pickup truck, since she'd never learned to drive in El Salvador. "Speaking of showing off," I said, pouring coffee into my favorite mug, a simple ceramic piece Elena had made in the pottery class she'd started taking in town. "Are you ready for today?" Elena's eyes lit up. Today was special. The local community college was officially announcing her as their new ESL instructor. It had taken a year and a half of night classes for Elena to get her teaching certification recognized in the United States, but she'd never complained about the work. If anything, she'd thrived on it. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "Teaching American students will be different than teaching children in El Salvador." "You'll be wonderful," I assured her. "You've been tutoring Maria and her family for 6 months. Have you seen how much their English has improved?" Maria was a young mother from Guatemala who worked at the local diner. Elena had started helping her with English after overhearing her struggle to communicate with customers. Word had spread through the immigrant community, and soon Elena was running informal English classes in our living room twice a week. The community college had noticed Elena's work and offered her the position after their previous ESL teacher moved away. The pay wasn't much, $18 an hour. But Elena had cried with joy when they offered it to her. She'd said it was like getting her life back. We sat on our back porch, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise paint the red rocks in shades of gold and crimson. The garden Elena had planted stretched out before us, rows of vegetables, herb spirals, and flower beds that bloomed in succession throughout the year. She'd created something beautiful from the desert soil, just as she'd created something beautiful from the wreckage of both our lives. "Frederick," Elena said suddenly, her voice thoughtful. "Do you ever regret it, leaving your old life behind?" I looked at her, this woman who'd saved me in every way possible, and smiled. "Never. Do you?" She shook her head. "Sometimes I feel guilty for being so happy. After Carlos died, I thought I would never feel joy again. But this..." She gestured to the garden, the chickens, the simple piece of our morning routine. "This feels like a gift I don't deserve." "You deserve all of this and more," I said, taking her hand. "Elena, you've given me 8 years I wouldn't have had. 8 years I've actually wanted to live." It was true. At 63, I felt more alive than I had in decades. We'd traveled together, the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, the Pacific Coast. We'd seen geysers and giant sequoias and sunsets over the ocean. But more than the places we'd visited, I treasured the quiet moments. Elena reading Spanish poetry aloud in the evenings, both of us learning to salsa dance from YouTube videos, the way she still brought me coffee in bed every Sunday morning. "There's something I want to tell you," Elena said, her voice suddenly shy. I turned to face her fully, noting the slight flush in her cheeks. "What is it?" "Yesterday, when I was in town getting supplies for my classroom, I stopped by the courthouse." My heart skipped. "The courthouse?" Elena reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small piece of paper. I picked up a marriage license application. I stared at the paper, then at Elena's face, which was bright with hope and nervousness. Elena Ramirez, I said slowly. Are you proposing to me? She laughed, the sound like music in the desert air. I thought maybe it was time. We've been together 2 years and She took a deep breath. I want to be your wife, Frederick. Really your wife, not just your companion. I'd been thinking about marriage for months, but I hadn't wanted to pressure her. Elena had been through so much trauma with Carlos's death and the upheaval of immigration. I'd wanted to give her all the time she needed to feel secure. But looking at her now, holding that marriage license application like it was a treasure map, I realized she was ready. We both were. Yes, I said, pulling her into my arms. Yes, absolutely yes. Elena threw her arms around my neck, laughing and crying at the same time. Really, you want to marry me? You want to? Elena, I've wanted to marry you since that first night we had dinner together. I just wanted to make sure you felt safe enough, loved enough. I've never felt safer, she said against my shoulder. You gave me a home, Frederick. Not just this house, but a real home. We held each other as the sun climbed higher, painting the desert in brilliant colors. After a while, Elena pulled back and looked at me seriously. There's one more thing, she said. I called my sister Rosa yesterday. She wants to come visit us. I smiled. Rosa lived in Los Angeles now with her 4 children, working as a seamstress. Elena sent her money every month and called her every Sunday, but they hadn't seen each other in person for 3 years. That's wonderful, I said. When is she coming? Next month, for the wedding. Elena grinned. She said she wants to meet the man who made her little sister so happy. Over the next 4 weeks, we planned a simple wedding ceremony in our garden. Tom would officiate. He'd gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. Rosa would bring her children, our only family. The community college faculty would come, along with Maria and the other families from Elena's English classes. The morning of the wedding, I stood in our garden wearing the simple white shirt and black pants Elena had chosen for me. She'd insisted on buying a traditional Mexican wedding dress, white cotton with intricate embroidery. And when she appeared at the garden gate, I felt my breath catch. She was radiant, carrying a bouquet of roses from her own garden, her dark hair crowned with a wreath of white flowers. At 54, she was the most beautiful bride I'd ever seen. As we exchanged vows under the desert sky, surrounded by the people who'd become our chosen family, I thought about the path that had brought us here. Miranda's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also led me to Elena. Without that darkness, I might never have recognized the light. I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life, Elena said, her voice clear and strong. You saved me, Frederick, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that gift. Elena, I said, my own voice thick with emotion. You didn't just save my life, you gave me a life worth living. I promise to love you with everything I have, for as long as I have. Tom pronounced us husband and wife, and as I kissed Elena for the first time as her husband, I heard the chickens clucking and the wind rustling through her garden. It was perfect. That evening, as our guests danced to music from Rosa's portable speaker, and the children chased fireflies among the flowers, Elena and I sat on our porch swing, watching our little world celebrate. Are you happy? I asked, though I could see the answer in her glowing face. I'm more than happy, she said, nestling against my shoulder. I'm home. Today I got a letter forwarded from my old address. Miranda had finally married Michael Richards, but according to the private investigator I'd hired to keep track of legal proceedings, their prenuptial agreement was ironclad. She'd get nothing if they divorced, and Michael had already been seen with other women. I showed the report to Elena, then threw it in the fireplace. Miranda was no longer part of my story.